going west. One was the worldly formalities of passport and US residency card, and the other was Srila Prabhupada's personal hesitancy based on reports from an astrologer. His health was, of course, the main factor, but at times he seemed ready to disregard everything and order his servants to somehow take him to London. Already he had sent Abhiram to Calcutta to deal with certain complications. His US residency green card had expired, and the consulate in Delhi had insisted that he come for an interview. Meanwhile, Prabhupada's passport and the temporary visa were being readied, and it would take 4 to 5 days. One of the Ayurvedic doctors who sometimes visited told Prabhupada he should wait a week or so. But Prabhupada found simply working up the will for travel and then not going, and then deciding again to go was exhausting. On hearing the latest news that the US consulate insisted on an interview, which seemed to be a physical impossibility, he couldn't rest. Lying on his bed for hours, he finally called to Lord Krishna and said, "I want to go. Can you arrange to carry me? Somehow or other take me. Here I don't expect any good. Psychological enthusiasm is there. Don't be afraid. I'm not afraid either to die in the temple here or there. It is all right with her." Lord Krishna asked to first discuss this with a few of the GBC men who were present. And when the devotees came into Prabhupada's room that afternoon, Prabhupada said, "No discussions. I have made up my mind. Arrange immediately for going." But again, there were complications. The doctor asked Srila Prabhupada to wait another week, and Prabhupada also did not want to leave India without his green card for the US. He sent Balavan to Calcutta to try and get the green card with so many matters unsettled. Prabhupada remained undecided whether to go to England now or wait. "I plan to stay in America," Srila Prabhupada said. "I will not come back until I complete the Bhagavatam. I want to organize there. American boys are so nice. If I can make everything strong, then the movement will endure. Let us go now. The doctors will say 4 days for the medicine to act, then wait a little longer, and that is a method. We should go down and push. Finally, a report came from Abhiram in Calcutta that the passport had been secured and the American consulate in Calcutta would help in getting the green card. Tamal Krishna ran upstairs and told Srila Prabhupada that there is very good news. Srila Prabhupada was lying down in bed, but when he heard the news, he began to slowly clap his hands, saying, "Give me good news and keep me alive." He began to think ahead to London. Radha Krishna deities they are so nice, he said. Radha Landanishwara, an innocent boy he is. Tamal Krishna reminded Srila Prabhupada how they had obtained those deities. "Yes," said Prabhupada, "it was unexpected. I was in a hopeless condition, but Krishna said, 'Here I am, take me.'" Srila Prabhupada thought of the Bhaktivedanta manner. "That lawn before my room is magnificent," he said. "I think a good time is coming. Madhadush has come, and Gaurasindha has come, lost child has come. These are good signs." As he spoke on, his voice, which had sounded at first small and weak, grew in strength. "Mistake there, maybe," he said, referring to the fall of some of his disciples, "but it can be rectified. At the time, be very careful not to commit mistakes. Krishna never forgets a person who does a little service. You also never forget," Prabhupada said to Tamal Krishna. "How can I forget? You have all helped me to execute the mission of Lord Chaitanya and my Guru Maharaj. I always pray to Krishna to give you strength. I am insignificant. I cannot do anything, but I pray to Krishna to give you strength." Prabhupada recalled how after installing the deities in Australia, he had thought, "These lectures and yavnas, what will they do with the deity?" Then, the next time he went there, he saw that they were worshipping nicely. "Try to do everything nicely," he said, "and Krishna will help." So that's an inspiration for the pujaris. Try to do everything nicely and Krishna will help. Whatever I have done has been done on this principle. Whatever my Guru Maharaj taught me, I try to the best of my capacity to carry out. Srila Prabhupada ki Jai. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
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 Read from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 5, Chapter 17, entitled The Descent of the River Ganges, and its text number
15.
15.
Yes, but it has no purport, only translation. 16 has purport.
Okay, so I'll just through that myself. Ilaviti tu Bhagavan Bhava Eka Eva Pumanna Yamyas Tatraparo Nirvishati Bhavanya Shapa Nimita Kyo Yat Pravikshata Shri Bhavastat Paschat Vakshami. Translation: Srila Goswami said, in the tract of land known as Ilavritavarsh, the only male person is Lord Shiva, the most powerful demigod. Goddess Durga, the wife of Lord Shiva, does not like any man to enter that land. If any foolish man dares to do so, she immediately turns him into a woman. I shall explain this later in the 9th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam. 16. Bhavani Natash Sri Ganar Buddha Sahasraya Avarujamano Bhagavatas Chaturmurtir Mahapurushasya Turiyam Tamasim Murtim Prakritim Atmana Sankarsana Samgyam Atmasamadi Vipena Sanita Pyatad Abhigrinan Bhava Upadavati. Translation: in 11th verse, Lord Shiva is always encircled by 10 billion maid servants of Goddess Durga who minister to him. The quadruple expansion of the Supreme Lord is composed of Vasudeva, Jumna, Aniruddha, and Sankarshan. Sankarshan, the fourth expansion, is certainly transcendental, but because his activities of destruction in the world are in the mode of ignorance, he is known as Tamasi, the Lord's form in the mode of ignorance. Lord Shiva knows that Sankarshan is the original cause of his own existence, and thus he always meditates upon him in trance by chanting the following mantra. Sometimes we see a picture of Lord Shiva engaged in meditation. This verse explains that Lord Shiva is always meditating upon Lord Sankarshan in trance. Lord Shiva is in charge of the destruction of the material world. Lord Brahma creates the material world. Lord Vishnu maintains it, and Lord Shiva destroys it. Because destruction is in the mode of ignorance, Lord Shiva and his worshipful deity Sankarshan are technically called Tamasi. Lord Shiva is the incarnation of Tamagun. Since both Lord Shiva and Sankarshan are always enlightened and situated in the transcendental position, they have nothing to do with the modes of material nature, goodness, passion, and ignorance. But because their activities involve them with the mode of ignorance, they are sometimes called Tamasi. Om Gyanatmananda Shyagananjana Slakaya Chakshumritamyana Tasmashiva Namaha Vikam Kroti Vachalam Tangam Lagate Grimya Kripatamam Bante Shukrimritaranam Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shri Advaita Gadadhar Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare Rama Rama Hare Hare. Translation again. In the 11th verse, Lord Shiva is always encircled by 10 billion maid servants of Goddess Durga who ministers to him. The quadruple expansion of the Supreme Lord is composed of Vasudeva, Pradyumna, Aniruddha, and Sankarshan. Sankarshan, the fourth expansion, is certainly transcendental, but because his activities of destruction in the material world are in the mode of ignorance, he is known as Tamasi, the Lord's form in the mode of ignorance. Lord Shiva knows that Sankarshan is the original cause of his own existence, and thus he always meditates upon him in trance by chanting the following mantra. So interesting that this verse and previous one was talking about Lord Shiva in his abode surrounded by 10 billion maidservants of Goddess Durga. And they're all engaged in the service of Lord Shiva, or in the service of Durga and Shiva. And she doesn't allow anyone to enter into the abode unless they're in a female form. So of course she's controlling that. So interesting. Also one time Lord Shiva wanted to enter the Rasa dance. Does anybody remember that story?
You had to get a body to look a certain movement.
He wanted to see the Rasa dance, so he was given a body of a gopi. And he was given the service of Shitapal, protector of the dam. So in Vrindavan, there are deities of Lord Shiva guarding all the different directions. There's different deities of Lord Shiva guarding in different directions of Vrindavan. And there's a Janitai Prabhu was pointing out the other day that when you go to Vrindavan, then you should go there and seek the permission of Lord Shiva to enter into the dam. If we just breathe in and it's like, oh, I'm here, check me out, I'm now in the dam. We're just taking selfies everywhere. There was a consciousness. It's not like you can just choose Krishna's my body. Or so some temples actually don't allow you to take photographs because they don't want to be disrespected with whatever you would do with the photographs. Of course, in our Krishna movement, we don't mind because the more people hear, see, engage in some form of the Lord association, then the more we purified. So it's interesting that Lord Shiva is always in meditation on Sankirtan. We see that he's in meditation, and people worship Lord Shiva as the supreme. And according to that section of the Puranas, there's 18 Puranas and 6 in goodness, 6 in passion, ignorance. So each mode has 6 Puranas, and those who read those related to Lord Shiva, then they consider him the supreme. So when someone comes along and says actually Krishna is the supreme, they become offended. Sometimes you've experienced that. It's not that we're putting Lord Shiva down, they just don't understand the whole picture. To them, he is the supreme. Just like if the councillor of South Lanarkshire comes here when we think, okay, he's the authority of this area, but he also has an authority. He has an authority. There's someone more supreme. So Lord Shiva certainly is supreme in relation to the mode of ignorance, and he's very merciful. He's supremely merciful. He's known as Ashutosh, easily pleased and easily angered. And even if he's angered, he's also easy to pacify because he's very merciful. There's a name for Lord Shiva, which there's probably a few names, but there's one in particular I was thinking. Does anybody know it, which relates to being merciful?
Ashutosh.
That was easily pleased, easily angered. But there's one which particularly refers to him drinking the ocean, the poison which came from the churning of the ocean of milk.
Neelkant.
Neelkant. His kant means like throat or neck, right?
Yes.
So when the demigods and the demons were churning the ocean of milk, we can read about that in the 8th canto if you like, then so many wonderful things came out of it, of the nectar. There was the treasure of the horse, there was a rabbit and the elephant, which Indra got as his carrier, and so there's many things. And then there was also some, just like when they were making ghee, then impurities come to the top, and you have to take them out. But nobody was capable of dealing with the poison which came from the churning, apart from Lord Shiva. And he took it and he held it in his throat. Therefore, he's known as the blue-throated one, because his throat became blue by holding that there in the other camp. So he did this out of compassion and mercy, so that all that deadly poison and inauspiciousness wouldn't affect anybody adversely. So this is his compassion. He takes some trouble on himself. Of course, for him it's no trouble. It's interesting that the Lord, in his different forms, Lord Shiva, Lord Vishnu, Krishna, they actually serve the living entities in so many ways. And we see in Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says that although there's no work ascribed to him, then still he does. He is the doer, Captain Isha, he's the supreme doer, because if he didn't, the whole world would be put into ruination. So what to speak of us, we can't think, oh, I think I'll just stay on the dole, that's an easy life. Or I'll just find a way where I can just put my feet up. We won't be satisfied. If Krishna doesn't have to do anything, but still he engages, so he's encouraging us that we can't even maintain physical body without work. But Lord Shiva, we see here, he is in meditation, and he's meditating on Sankarshan. And this is also a lesson for us. He knows, like it's mentioned here, he knows that Sankarshan is the original cause of his own existence. And even Lord Krishna, as a householder in Dwarka, when Narada Muni was going to visit Krishna, who was living with the 16,108 queens, and Krishna had expanded himself that amount of times, and he was living with all of them, and he was engaged sometimes as a householder in doing some apparent mundane things. But the difference is that even in his example, he was showing that the duty of the householders is to meditate on the Supreme. So what was Krishna doing? Yeah, he's meditating on himself. And someone might be foolish and become a monist and think, well, I'll meditate on myself. But Krishna's meditating on himself because he is the Supreme. So his example is not, this is the difference between imitation and example. If we imitate Krishna, we meditate on ourselves. But if we follow the teaching, what he set by example is we meditate on the Supreme, then we meditate on him as well. So there's nothing or no one more supreme than Krishna, so who's going to meditate on? If he's to meditate on someone else, that would indicate that he's not supreme. And here we see Lord Shiva is meditating on Sankarshan, which indicates that Lord Shiva is also not the supreme. And in the nectar of devotion, it mentions that he has, is it 84% of the qualities? The living entity has 78% qualities of the Supreme Lord, and Lord Shiva has, it's 84. It's more percentage anyway. So he has his own tattva, Shiva tattva. So it's also described that because Vishnu has nothing to do with the mode of ignorance, then Shiva is manifestation of Lord Vishnu, who handles the mode of ignorance. And that's also explained in the Brahma Samhita, where it's described that Lord Shiva is just as milk and yogurt are one and the same but different, then Shiva and Vishnu are the same but different. Now Vishnu can do all the things. It's like from milk, you can make curd, you can make yogurt, you can make butter, etc. From yogurt, you can't make all those things, so therefore we can see how Lord Shiva has some of the qualities of Vishnu, but not all of them. So it's a very nice example that shows that the difference there. And this philosophy of Achinti Veda Veda Tattva is also manifest there. So Ilavrita Varsh is another name for
Bharatvarsha?
Varsh is also another name for
The earth.
The earth, Bharat. And here it's mentioned he's surrounded by 10 billion maidservants. So Prabhupada did mention some time ago about this myth of overpopulation. Now, if people want a certain standard of living and they want to maintain a certain, as Prabhupada called it, so-called puffed up civilization, it certainly is puffed up and it's so-called civilization. Now, if they want to maintain that on those terms, then perhaps they would consider it overpopulated. But in terms of an acre of land and a cow, then it's not overpopulated. And you take a look at Scotland, for example, it's certainly not the biggest country in the world, and there's so much land there that you can grow food. There's so much arrangement can be made. I one time took a train journey from Delhi to Calcutta on the Rajdhani. It was 14 hours, and practically like 13 and a half of those hours was just fields and fields and fields and fields. And of course, it's all being used. And even in parts of the world, like for example Nepal, then they do terraces into the hills, so they're even farming on mountains. So there's no such, certainly a lot more can be done to provide food. So this overpopulation thing we're seeing, Lord Shiva's got 10 billion maid servants, and that's just Lord Shiva, what to speak of whoever else was inhabiting the planet at the time. So it's all a question of who do we accept as our authority, and if people want a certain lifestyle, if somebody wants to own 1,000 acres of land for their own pleasure, then yeah, there will be overpopulation because you're cramming everybody into a small space so you can have more. This is the Ishavasya principle, taking what is ours and not taking other things non-real to whom they belong. So a Krishna conscious devotee will take what we need, keep body and soul together and for our service. If we had no preaching mission, then we would live a much more frugal lifestyle. We wouldn't require so many buildings, so many other apparatus. But because we have a mission, and Prabhupada said that devotees are simply, they're satisfied by simply chanting Hare Krishna and living in a mud hut. Now certainly he was happy, and he showed that in Mayapur. Although those big temples being built, he wanted to just live in the mud hut, which they maintained. And what is maintained, you can visit that mud hut. When you go to Mayapur, you can see where Prabhupada stayed there. He preferred that simple situation. It's very pleasing to the mind, it's in the mode of goodness. People think, oh, this is prehistoric, or it's barbaric, or it's primitive. Maybe not barbaric, but they maybe say primitive. But actually, the science of these things is such a sustainable thing that after so much running around and ostentatious postulating, then the big controllers of the world are going to have to come to the conclusion that simple living is the only sustainable thing. India has that culture. If they go back to the roots, they have that culture for many millennia. They've been sustaining such a big population. It's never been a land which has had a scanty little population. There's always been a big population. Now you read in the Krishna book how many millions of cows Nanda Maharaj had, how many people would it take to look after them? Nanda Maharaj was one cow herd man. How many queens were rescued by Krishna? So a queen generally means there's loads of other people below them, such as maidservants, citizens, etc. So there wasn't like India was barren, at least in any time in the history of Mahabharata or Ramayana. So this overpopulation thing, it was once said that the population of the world could stand shoulder to shoulder in the Isle of Man, which is a tiny little island off the west coast of England. Maybe it would take a bit more now, but if we really want the solution, then we have to accept that there is a supreme proprietor. If we don't accept it as a supreme proprietor, then we're simply going to be trying to make so many different situations ourselves. And then this artificial standard of living, where people have increased their bodily demands. Just like people think they need this, they think they need that. People think they need their cigarettes, they need their booze. But if you take the cigarettes away from them, they won't die. You know, some people would rather spend money on cigarettes, drink, drugs, video games than spend it on food. This is what's more important to them. So this is how deluded people are, that they can't even think what is good for them. I went to a Ayurvedic clinic in South India, and Dr. Shiv Kumar told me that the problem with people nowadays, they don't even know how to listen to their own body. Their bodies tell them they're thirsty and they can't figure out if they're thirsty or they're hungry. They tell them it's hungry, they don't know whether they're hungry or thirsty. They can't, and therefore by the time they hear what the body's saying, quite often damage is done. So we've become so hardened to even our own well-being. We're acting day by day in such a way which is harming our own well-being, physically, mentally, spiritually. And Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita that an intelligent person doesn't like to suffer. Of course, we could say, well, anyone doesn't like to suffer, even a fool doesn't like to suffer, but it's an intelligent person who will seek out the source of suffering and remove those sources. You know, say, for example, you smoke cigarettes, you know that it's going to harm you, you see it, people are getting cancer, people are dying from it, it's causing you so much physical limitation. So the intelligent thing to do is, don't do it. Or so many other things. And it's all based on desire. There was one time, Srila Prabhupada was giving a class. It was in 26 Second Avenue. And so he was asked, at the end of the class, one boy asked a question, and then Prabhupada answered it, and then he said to him, so what are you going to do? Are you going to join the temple? And he says, oh, I'd like to join. He says, but I have some problem. He says, what is that problem? He says, well, I'm too attached to speculating. And Prabhupada says, so you want to continue or you want to stop it? He says, stop it. He says, then stop it. So some people may say, oh, that's very simplistic, but it is as simple as that. It's a matter of what are we prepared to do for our own well-being. If we're attached to speculating, and it's actually just wasting our time and energy. Speculating is such an exhausting thing to do. If anyone's ever been in a situation where they have to really speculate hard about an outcome of something, then it's so exhausting. It takes up so much energy. The brain already takes up enough energy just managing the whole body. But to speak of if we're just like speculating a lot, very exhausting. And so this devotee understood that he was a big speculator, and that was getting in the way of things. So anything which is getting in the way of us going to Krishna, simply the decision is, do we want to continue with it or do we want to stop it? So it's as simple as making that decision. Now, it's not as easy as that, because we may agree and say, yes, I do want to stop it, I'm going to stop it. And then the challenge is, okay, we physically may stop something, just like, say, for example, you like to drink whiskey, and you decide, okay, it's not good for me, I better stop it, I want to be a devotee. Devotees don't drink whiskey. So you decide you're going to stop, but then your body's craving it. You maybe experience some difficulty coming off of that. And then you just know that, okay, I made this decision for my own good, so therefore I have to tolerate it until this demand departs. And then we engage in devotional service, we replace in any type of material thing which we take pleasure, we replace it with Krishna consciousness. And to begin with, it may be some austerity involved there, but in due course of time, we will lose the desire for these things. If we're not losing the desire for the material world and the things which has to offer it, then We have to look at ourselves and look at our practices. If we're always hoping, for example, we used to have this. There was one devotee, he would chant around so fast, and so, you know, it didn't sound like you're listening to him. Oh, I'm just trying to get them out of the way. I say, what are they in the way of? You know, the rounds are in the way, the reading's in the way, the class is in the way, the service is in the way. What's it in the way of? Where are we going? What are we heading towards? You know, the chanting is the destination, and it's also the journey. And the reading is the destination, it's also the journey. Even if we have such a passionate mind, and if we, you know, one of our biggest things may be, okay, we just take shelter and prasadam, even at that we can't satisfy ourselves because we're eating one thing, thinking of the next, and then we're eating that, we're thinking, I wonder if there's going to be any left for seconds. So our mind is still agitated. Therefore, whatever we're doing in Krishna service, we have to bring it into the moment. And Krishna explains that in Bhagavad Gita, wherever the mind wanders, bring it back. And that way, whatever we're doing, we'll be able to give it our best endeavour. And Krishna never said we have to be perfect at everything, we have to be absolutely brilliant, but we have to give it our best attention, give it our focus. And whatever we've been asked to do, if we've been given some duty which we might not feel we're very qualified to do, then we simply find out from other devotees. Therefore, a little bit of humility. Oh, Prabhu, you're good at this, I don't know much about this, can you show me? And even after been shown, sometimes we might not have a natural aptitude for something, but we just try our best so that the endeavour is what Krishna is pleased by. If we do some half-hearted attempt and just say, oh, it's endeavour that counts, then Krishna's in the heart. He knows whether we're endeavouring or whether we're just trying to pull the wool over. But you can't pull the wool with Krishna's eyes, because even Hiranyakashipu couldn't escape. So we're about to see the mantra which Lord Shiva is chanting when he's meditating on Sankirtan. So, although Lord Shiva has been described here that Tamasi, but it doesn't mean to say that he's under the mode of ignorance, although he may be involved with the activities in the mode of ignorance. Prabhupada said here.
Yeah.
It's not that they are under the modes, he says, but because of activities involved then with the mode of ignorance, they're sometimes called tamasi, but they're actually transcendental. Lord Shiva and Sankirtan are always enlightened and situated in the transcendental position. They have nothing to do with the modes of material nature, goodness, passion, and ignorance. Nothing to do with them at all. But because they have some involvement with them, then sometimes they're called tamasi. But if Lord Shiva was to be, if someone was considered Lord Shiva to be in tamas gun, that would mean that someone else is putting him in tamas gun, and someone else would be in control of that tamas. So logically, if Lord Shiva is called tamasi, it's not that he's in tamas, he's the controller of it. And we see with that pastime of that has been spoken about recently, when Daksha offended Lord Shiva, Sati gave up her body, and Lord Shiva wasn't happy with that, but ultimately he was pacified. As Lord Shiva was saying, Ashutosh, he was easily pacified, and he became peaceful. If we were in such a position, you know, if someone was most dear to us, and they gave up their life because someone had offended, then we would probably be on some kind of vendetta. There'd be some justice getting distributed, or at least we'd be very morose. But Lord Shiva, being always in the transcendental position, remains unaffected. So this is also just like it's explained when Krishna comes to the material world, he may be in the material world, but he's never entangled by it, like a spider spins a web and can freely go anywhere on that web. He's never entangled. Everyone else who contacts that web, they get entangled. And the more they try to get free, the more they become entangled. This is like the living entity in the material world. We try to do so many things to make ourselves free, but unless these activities are guided by Guru Sadhu and Shastra, then we're simply entangling ourselves more and more in the material world. So just like an insect that's caught in the web of the spider, as it tries to wriggle out, it becomes more and more wound up. This is the nature of the material world, as Prabhupada explains in the purport to the Hare Krishna mantra, that the more we try to lord it over the material energy, and lording it over means that we try to make this adjustment to mitigate this and this adjustment and that adjustment. We're always trying to make some adjustment. The more we become entangled in our complexities. So, what is the best adjustment to make in this material world? Is to make a plan to get out of this material world. The cure for all these material difficulties is not a material cure, it's a spiritual cure. Therefore, Satatam Kirtayantamam, always be thinking of Krishna, always chant his glories, chant his name. So Prabhupada says that regarding japa, minimum 16 on the beats and unlimited off the beats. And what is that? Japa is asking for service. And we have to keep that balance there, of course. Not that we just say, okay, I'm happy to do service, I don't need to chant the japa any longer, because eventually we'll forget why we're doing it. And the japa is associated with Krishna personally through his holy name and becoming purified by that attention. When we're attentive to hearing Krishna, then he's present there. If Krishna walked into the room, we'd be giving him so much attention. So when we're chanting japa, then we should be given that attention. And the mind is very fickle. There's so many things we've engaged the mind in, we've exposed the mind to so many things. So there's so many distractions internally already there. We'll just speak of what's going on externally. The distractions, whether internal or external, are actually internal, because we have a mind which is chanchala, flickering. Krishna explains, yes, it's difficult to control the wind in the mind, more so than the wind, as Arjuna said, but it's possible by detachment and suitable practice. So detachment means that we have to disengage ourselves from things which are detrimental for our devotional progress and engage in that which is going to be conducive for our spiritual progress. And maybe lastly, the Sunyam Gyana Kamadinavitam and Kurina Krishna Nishyavam, to accept that which is favourable for devotional service and reject that which is unfavourable. So, along the journey, sometimes we're quite happy to reject certain things which are unfavourable because we're done with them. But other things we're still hanging on to. We're not quite done with that. We need a bit more convincing. Either someone has to say the right thing, it just clicks for us at the right time, or we have to suffer a bit. Sometimes we're not so intelligent that we just give the associated suffering up just by hearing about it, that we have to go through it ourselves and think, yeah, it's true what it says in the Shastra, it's true what the sadhus and the spiritual masters have been telling me, but I had to do it, because I'm so thick. I had to do it and see for myself. And then, of course, unfortunately, sometimes, even though we know it's wrong, and we're suffering with it, we are so attached, we just keep on falling into the same situation again and again. But we shouldn't lose heart, we should just continue with this process of Krishna consciousness, because as long as we get the process on, then the heat is under the ghee, the heat is under the butter, the process is continuing, so don't give up the process. Mother Yamuna once gave a class to us when we were Bhaktas in Chaitanya College, and she says, whatever happens, never leave us gone. just stay within it and just keep up the practice of Krishna consciousness. So many things change, in your course of time you'll see many things come and go. But if we keep a good practice of Krishna consciousness, then we'll still be here. And this is what we're looking for. We're looking to continue this for the rest of our whole lives. Bhaktivinoda Thakur says, just give one life to Krishna and see what the result is. Back to what Prabhupada promised that. So we'll just stop there if anyone's got any questions, comments or corrections.
A comment, but I can't remember what it was related to now, but it was something about the devotee becoming, could become discouraged when he's practicing Krishna consciousness. So Mahaprabhu has just been giving a little video on that, saying that Srila Prabhupada used to say, this devotee is a rascal, but I still love him. He said, so we should also say that to ourselves, that I still love myself, I still have affection for myself, even though I'm not up to the standard, and that safeguards us becoming discouraged. So it's not a bad thing to do that, because it's favourable for your practicing Krishna consciousness. If you can't even be your own friend, then it's really, really difficult to do.
Yes, good point. And we should never give up hope, give up heart. One thing to always remember is that we do have a place in the spiritual world. That's where we belong. So, Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita, even the most sinful of all sinners, when they're situated in the boat of transcendental knowledge, can overcome all obstacles of the material world. So, although we may, in our humility, think, I don't deserve, but the fact is, we have a place where we belong. So we should always be thinking, well, perhaps I've associated with the material world in such a way which has caused me to become distracted from the goal. If we become discouraged, then we have to find some association which encourages us. And sometimes the discouragement comes from our own misunderstanding. We have expectations, and if someone doesn't instruct us in a particular way, or we expect to be recognized, but we haven't been recognized because perhaps we're going about things the wrong way, and you may be trying to please somebody, but you're trying wrongly. And so Prabhupada would sometimes do that with the disciples, with the devotees, is that they may be serving him, and from a material point of view, if someone's serving you, then you should be showing some gratitude. And of course, Prabhupada was very grateful always, but he took it as a responsibility to train his disciples. He wasn't taking it for himself personally that they were serving him. He was taking it that he's training them to serve Krishna. So if they're serving him and they're doing it wrongly, he's telling them to do it like this, because he's training them to serve Krishna, so they know how to do it properly. It's the mood, it's the attitude. And Arjuna was very much discouraged because he was faced with a very insurmountable task. And we see the teachings of Krishna and Bhagavad Gita helped Arjuna to become free from that discouragement, from his doubt, from his illusion, and to become completely encouraged to carry on serving Krishna with full enthusiasm. So it's all in Prabhupada's books. Sometimes, if we're not in the best state of mind, we might find it hard to extract. We forget what we already know. And therefore we have to keep association with devotees. Therefore there has to be inquiries. How can I get out of this predicament that I'm in? And then someone will say, oh yeah, I knew that all along, I just forgot. This is the nature of the material world, forgetfulness. Therefore, not any of us can make it on our own. We have to have association with devotees. Just like, there's that famous song, I get by with a little help from my friends, right? You know that song? So no one is an island. We try to do it on our own. Sometimes even some people are so capable, they do amazing things. You try to do it on their own, but somewhere along the line, they'll fall, they make a mistake. Because it's just not possible. We have, our process is the process of hearing transcendental sound vibration. Now, pratyaksha means direct sense perception. You try to see God with your own senses. It's not possible because he will remain hidden. Srila Prabhupada's spiritual master, Srila Bhaktivedanta, says, don't try to see God, but act in such a way that God will see you. And then, so we attract Krishna, although he's the most attractive, we attract Krishna by our sincere endeavour to please him. And then he will manifest more and more in our life. So regardless of the pushings and pullings of the mind, the senses, the ups and downs, the passing of the good and bad karma, if we remain fixed in devotional service, remain fixed in chanting, hearing, associating, etc., then in due course of time, then simply there'll be nothing left but pure devotional service. So the material world is very good at discouraging us, and our mind is sometimes not our best friend. So sometimes we take shelter of our mind, which actually discourages us. Even our own mind is betraying us. So the mind has to be trained so that it will actually be your best friend. Basically, the mind just playing back what we put in. So if we put more Krishna conscious, more positive, then it'll be playing that back. Whereas if we simply just allow it to become materially contaminated, then that's what's going to make it difficult for us in our spiritual life. So try to spiritualize everything by engaging mind and senses in Krishna's service. Rishikenam, Sevanam, Bhakti Uchite. Because Krishna is pure, Pavitram, when we engage in any of these aspects of the processes, devotional service, beginning with hearing and chanting, then our mind becomes purified, and then it becomes our friend. It starts giving suggestions how we can become a better devotee, how we can improve our Krishna consciousness. Is there anything else you'd like to add? Is that okay?
So, you mentioned in due course of time, like things will change, say, will be more Krishna conscious. Is there a definition what the due course of time could be?
Well, Prabhupada, he gave a definition of surrender. He says that someone says, well, it takes a long time to surrender. He says, no, not a long time, just a minute, 1 minute. He says, in fact, it's just instantly. So sometimes the process of surrender for us is incremental. And then sometimes we have the opportunity to make some bigger surrender. So that the due course of time is that regardless of so in Bhagavad Gita 2.14, Krishna explains Matasparshas to Kanteya Shutoshna Sukadukada Admapayana Nityastanti Dekashavarata. So we should learn to tolerate without being disturbed. So just learning to tolerate means that we, regardless of the mind, its demands, the pushings and pullings of the senses, then we engage in devotional service, this process of sadhana bhakti, which means we've understood there's a goal, and we understand that there's a process to attain that goal. The goal is pure love of God. And to re-establish our original relationship with Krishna, we understand that the living entity, the soul, eternally related to Krishna, and our nature is eternal, full of bliss and full of knowledge. In the material world, while the mind is dictating to us, and we're allowing the senses to be in control, then we're not experiencing that eternal bliss and knowledge. But when we start to remove the senses from the distracting sense objects, engage in Krishna's service, engage the mind in thinking of Krishna, etc., then gradually we become purified and we gain an attraction more for Krishna, and our attraction for the material world diminishes. So this gradually, it just depends on how much we're going to endeavour to let go of the past and go to Krishna. So it can be soon, or it can be later, depending on how much we're holding on to. Just like there's the example of the wedding party. They were all intoxicated, and in the evening of the wedding, they get into a boat and they're all rowing. And then they woke up in the morning, they were all exhausted, and they realised they woke up to find that they hadn't gone anywhere because they hadn't lifted the anchor. So sometimes this is what happens, we're endeavouring hard and we're endeavouring hard, but we don't seem to be getting anywhere because the anchor's not up. So we have to learn to simultaneously let go of the anchor to material world. What's anchoring us to material world, let go of that, and then the rowing is the endeavours forward in Krishna consciousness. Then we'll see we're getting somewhere. The interesting thing is that sometimes we don't see that we're getting somewhere, but others see it. You may have experienced that. You look at someone who is a devotee now, and you remember what they were like, 2, 3, 4, or 5 years ago, or even a few weeks ago, what they looked like. And the process actually does work quick. We just have to be patient. Therefore, Rupa Goswami says this is one of the 6 things which is required for success in devotional service is patience. And if you don't have any, it can be quite painful. It's like, you're told to be patient, but I don't have any. There's no option. You have to be, because it's like when someone gets married and perhaps they want children, they have to wait at least 9 months. They can't just say, okay, we want a kid, we're married, this is honeymoon, let's have a kid now. No, you have to wait at least 9 months. There's a process and we have to be patient. So we're in the process, and the more we engage in the process, then the sooner that will come. And when we experience some difficulties in practicing the process, then we seek help from other devotees. And if we see that there's others more advanced than ourselves, then we seek help from them especially, seek good association. Is that okay?
Yeah.
Swami Arvind ki
Jai.
Prabhupada ki
Jai.
Srimad Bhagavatam ki
Jai.
Thakur Premanande
Hari Bol.
Sri Prabhupada ki
Jai.